breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
All right, everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Brainstorming with the Docs. I'm Dr. Kolby Condos, my co-host, Dr. Glenn Harrison. What's up, buddy?
Oh, not too much. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, man. So today we are talking about something that affects a lot of people every single day, definitely affects our productivity, which we have done podcasts on in the past, and our energy, which we've also talked about in the past. And what we are talking about today are some strategies to improve your focus. This is something that each and every one of us can benefit from. I mean, how many times during the day do you look down and you're like, wow, I've blown 15 minutes. I'm not really paying attention. I got to figure out what I'm doing with my life. I do that quite frequently.
Exactly. Yeah. Daily progress going down by 50% because you can't finish a task or stay engaged.
Right. Right. So if this is your first time watching or listening to the podcast or video cast and you got value out of the content that you listened to today, make sure you hit like and subscribe and turn on notifications because we're going to continue to roll out new content each and every week. And you never know when we might cover something that benefits you. So without further ado, let's talk about improving our focus.
Yes. I was finding that my focus was slipping because I worked a little bit too late and maybe I didn't have enough downtime. And then when we started here today, I wasn't completely engaged. So our focus is being affected, I think, on a definitely an hourly basis, if not every 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, you could even argue shorter than that, right? How many times are you talking with someone and they're like, oh, well, I'm sorry, what?
The cell phone.
Sorry, I just briefly remembered I had my cell phone in my hand and I just completely disengaged with what we were talking about. And I think that I'm just as guilty of this as anybody else. So, so that does tie into what we were talking about. Like, how long can you focus without distraction? You know, is this something that is habitual? Like, is this a habit you developed where, oh, I got a little bit of downtime, I'm gonna check Facebook or Instagram or my email or whatever. Are you checking social media? Are you looking at your phone? You know, those I feel like are two of the biggest, or that I feel like is the biggest distraction that all of us are suffering from. And that's something that actually I suffer from personally myself. This is why I can't have my phone on my desk when I'm doing my patient notes.
Yeah, well, that's a great example of being self-aware enough, where you forcibly remove at least one major distraction. You're aware of the distraction. You remove it out of your environment to exercise your mind to stay focused on one thing.
Absolutely.
And our minds get get addicted to hyperstimulation, and then we can't focus, we can't concentrate, we can't read and remember what we read. We can't listen to someone talk too long, or we're looking out into Never Land out the window, right?
Absolutely.
So these things go from one to another and one to another, but being self-aware of it is huge. Another thing to improve your focus, or maybe to be aware of, do we feel foggy or tired when we're attempting to concentrate? So that's more of an indicator of maybe a lack of neurological stamina or being addicted to stimulants.
Absolutely.
I mean, neurological stimulus. And if we don't get the stimulus, that we just shut down.
Exactly. Well, then you look at it too, is it like that your metabolic capacity has been altered, right? So you no longer are able to maintain that attentive focus because you have issues with basically brain endurance. And that could be a whole variety of issues. I mean, one of the biggest ones that we see in our clinics, I know, is blood sugar dysregulation, where the people are having blood sugar crashes and all of a sudden they're like tired and fatigued and they can't concentrate. And then they again need stimulus, whether that's their phone or caffeine or whatever. So that might be another thing that you need to look into is blood sugar regulations. That if you improve your blood sugar regulation and your blood sugar is consistent, your attentiveness and your focus is going to definitely improve. Yeah,
your brain has the fuel that it needs versus these spikes and surges and spikes and surges.
We talked about this in one of the previous podcasts where like up to 80% of all the glucose that you consume in a day is metabolized in your brain. So that really can kind of show you the importance of maintaining regular blood sugar regulation.
Exactly. And I know you're working with neuro cases all the time. So you see this on a daily basis of certain neurological disorders or brain dysfunction as a result of metabolic problems, whether it's, again, glucose, etc. We talked a little bit. I know we had to have talked about this during our diabetes podcast that we did. Two episodes. I can't remember. There's a few there anyway.
Yeah, 2, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So there we tap into all of this as well. And I think we even got into it in the adrenal fatigue podcast. We started talking about blood sugar metabolism and brain function and overall energy. Now, I know we talked a little bit about this underlying neurological or metabolic components of, sleep deprivation. Are we already struggling? How much neuroinflammations do we have due to sleep deprivation, and how is that playing in focus or concentration? I know you probably see the effects of medications on neurological functioning.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you have certain medications that can it alters your neurotransmitter levels, right? And you can be artificially basically where you're at. So you could have attention issues based on medications. You could be over medicated, under medicated. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that you need to consider there. That's why it's really important that you have that conversation with your primary care physician or your healthcare provider. So you can tell them, hey man, look, I started this medication. It seems to be helping with this problem, but I've noticed since I started it, I cannot pay attention for the life of me. I've got like a 2-second attention span. I'm tired, whatever it is. So that they can address that, because that might be something that they don't even think to ask you. But it can definitely be
I think it's very important. I think some people are very, very, they're very comfortable and quick to tell their doctor on what they're feeling. And other ones are like, well, this is the doctor. He or she gave me whatever I needed, and it must be a figment of my imagination, my symptoms, and I'm not going to question them. Well, not necessarily do you need to question your doctor, but you can definitely relay the information, because they don't know everything. You're the best, you're the best monitor of symptoms, and don't ignore that stuff, because it can turn into some nasty problems, even like blood pressure medications. I know you probably see this in clinic. I see it, where blood pressure is too low is most commonly that I see as a result of maybe overdosed or a problem with the dose of their medication, or maybe the wrong type of medication or what have you, but their blood pressure gets so low that their brain starts starving for blood, therefore starving for oxygen and sugar. And then it leads a whole host of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the thing that I always consider is that maybe their blood pressure is being driven down for a reason. So maybe they had like a cardiovascular incident, or they've had, a heart attack or something like that. But that doesn't, if it gets too low, it can be a problem too, because then you look at things like syncope where they pass out, or again, brain fog or fatigue or lack of concentration. All those things can be things to consider. So I guess it kind of basically, when I look at how you improving your focus, well, you need to analyze why your focus is poor to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. So is this a behavioral thing where like you can't delay the gratification of looking at your cell phone or your computer? Is this something where it could be more metabolic, where you really need to analyze, what your blood sugar is doing?
And many other indicators of what's going on in the blood.
Yeah. Is there any other co-symptoms? Are you sleeping enough? Are you on medication? Is it an external cause, or is it an internal cause? So basically, is it caused by environment or one of those factors such as like sleep or medications, or is it you, where you're not eating the way you should, or you can't delay the gratification for the phone?
Yeah. So, and I think the behavioral piece is absolutely huge. And, in the digital era, when it really took off, who did we see that was using the digital technology more than anyone? It was the younger people. So then the older generation were looking at the younger generation, say, they can't communicate. They can only talk in text. Well, those habits were adopted by later generations now. Mm-hmm. So you have people in their 80s and 90s sending pictures to their grandchildren, which is great. Maybe they're able to communicate a little bit better, but they're following into the same habits. And the negative habits that compromise attention and focus and cognition. And you're seeing it across all generations now. I think the problem is, and there's more and more research on this, is when young generations are hyper stimulated, where there's still brain neurological development, it's causing some problems, and we don't know how that's gonna play out. So I think when it comes to strategies, the behavioral piece of what you said, putting your phone down when you're, working on notes or working in the clinic or whatever you're doing that needs one focus, getting rid of all of the distractions with the exception of the desired task. And you even made that note here. And I remember doing that. And the first time because I was like, wow, I'm start one project and the next thing I'm doing another one. And then the next thing I'm doing another one. And there's 3 partially completed projects and I don't even know where I was. And I didn't realize how subtle that behavior was happening. And then the next thing I know that I wasn't getting anything done. And it was getting worse.
Absolutely. I've had to do the same thing where I just like literally have to physically remove my phone because there's times where I'm just like, well, I finished that.
Exactly.
It's so second nature. We do it so frequently. And it actually made me uncomfortable when I removed it and I created a barrier. It's not that I didn't bring the phone to the clinic. It's not that I like threw it away. I just literally moved it into another room. I still had it in the clinic with me. But every time I went to grab it, it was like a subtle reminder of like, holy cow, are you this actually addicted to this hunk of plastic?
That's right.
And it was really uncomfortable.
And I didn't realize how bad my focus was till I pulled the stimulation away, like pulled the phone away. Again, I did the same thing, put it in another room. I didn't allow for any other browser tabs open. I was just working on what I needed to. And I was catching myself getting distracted or wasn't able to maintain the focus to continue the task more than like 10 minutes. It was frightening. It scared the heck out of me. I was like, my goodness, what's happening? And it was an uncomfortable situation for quite some time, literally, of when I would sit down and block out that time. That's all I was going to do. And it was, if I started out with 30 minutes, I couldn't sit for 30 minutes without looking for something to be distracted. And then I was able to graduate and get to an hour. But then I go back to those old habits. I lose that ability to focus, and then I got to do it again. So I think behavior plays a big role in this. I've seen it in clinic. I've seen it where kids were failing in school. Their parents brought them in due to all sorts of other health issues, but their biggest thing was inability to concentrate and focus. And these were very hardworking students. They just couldn't focus. And literally, I remember there was this one person I worked with, and he was looking out the window. We couldn't sit in our appointment. We were in 15 minutes and he was looking out the window. I know I'm not that exciting, but I was asking him a question. So he was actively engaged in the conversation and he couldn't. So naturally, part of the care or part of the strategy was to do exactly what you said, Dr. Kolby. Remove everything. He literally had his computer, no other tabs could be open, a book, and his pen. That was it. Everything else was completely removed from the room. So it took time, but he was able to adapt and thrive in school again. So it's a real deal. It's a real thing.
Absolutely. So as far as like what your strategies, or let's just say our strategies are for improving our focus, I think that you can see kind of where we started. My first thing and my biggest thing was obviously removing my cell phone, because that is just an absolute trigger. If I see it, I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to check whatever I'm going to check. So removing that from the equation was a big part for me. I just don't have it on my desk anymore. I move it into actually one of my exam rooms and I just leave it there because I use my cell phone for certain things during the exam. I don't have my phone when I'm trying to be productive, get patient notes done, do a referral, whatever I'm doing. That's got my undivided attention. Like you said, unplug from everything else but what you're trying to accomplish, right? So no Instagram, Facebook, no other tabs. So you're not looking at Google or whatever, unless it has to do directly with what you're trying to accomplish, right? What are some of your other ones?
Well, for me, it was setting the time frame. So my problem, I really believe that I couldn't sit for very long. It's I was stir crazy. No, it was my brain couldn't focus. It was conditioned to not focus. And I allowed that with the onset of technology and stimulus. And like, how many people have been watching TV? I've done this. I'm watching TV. Guilty. And then I have my computer sitting on the coffee table. So I was doing something. And then the next thing on my other hand, I'm looking at my phone. Like, how much madness can a person have? And I catch myself like, if there was a little gauge on my brain trying to record stimulation, it would have been off the charts. And I think we get so addicted to that. One screen wasn't enough. Three was maybe enough.
Three's the number. One is the loneliest number, man. Did you know that?
So for me, I think the biggest thing outside that all that technology was just blocking time. And not trying to save the day when I'm, to accomplish more than what was even possible. So realistic time blocks. And if anybody's listening to this, struggling with this, don't try to do an hour. You will never do it. Try doing
start with 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And then when you see if it kind of surprises you, how challenging that was, stick with that for a little while and then block out more. But you have to have an alarm to go off, and you can't, but you'll catch yourself. You will be distracted.
And it'll be uncomfortable.
It will be uncomfortable. That's the most frightening thing, as you mentioned. So that's so setting realistic sessions to do your work with little breaks. Another thing that I find, and I always found, that if I go for a walk or I'm doing some kind of activity, breaking up on my breaks within my work blocks or between my work blocks, not just sitting to take a break, but actually moving. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. It could be walking outside. It could be sitting on your deck. It could be anything. Exercise in general is always going to help with this. I'm always a big advocate of sleep, and I think I'm an advocate of sleep because, and this is the way providers are. If they have a problem with something, that's the one thing they harp on that is the most important, because it was the most important for them, right? So if you see a doctor that has a lot of digestive problems, what is he or she going to be the most 100% priority?
In the gut, right?
It's going to be, it's going to be in the gut. So we got to remember that we're biased with this, and I think everybody is subject to bias. And even me with sleep, I see sleep as so important. I struggle with my sleep. I struggle to follow what I need, and it's night and day. And the people I work with, there's very few people that sleep enough or have the quality of sleep they need. So sleep is a third one for me that is extremely important. Are there any ones that we didn't touch on that you had?
No, I think the exercise is like a big one for me personally. I've noticed that even so I try to exercise either early in the morning or in the evening after my family's gone to bed. And even if you do like 40 minutes, that's pretty much on average of all I do. But I notice that I'm way more productive and I'm more focused as I move into the day, either that same day if I do it in the morning or the next day if I do it in the evening. I think that sleep is super important, like you talked about. Like exercise and sleep kind of go hand in hand too. If you exercise well, you're going to sleep well for the most part. Mm-hmm. Another thing is like diet. I cannot tell you how important this is, because when I was in graduate school, I was like that typical, like, oh man, I got anatomy practical tomorrow. I got to study till like 1 a.m. So you're in there pounding Red Bulls and doing whatever. And then you get to the test and you're like, I don't remember any of this. And you're not paying attention. You're not really gathering that information. You're kind of like, oh, I'm going to pop next door and see how Tim's doing studying for this anatomy practical. And you don't really do any studying, right? So good sleep, good exercise, healthy diet, right? Huge. Yeah. And then actually that kind of falls into my last thing is like, don't artificially prop yourself up with caffeine all the time. Mm-hmm. Caffeine's awesome in certain situations and for certain things, but not all the time.
That's right. It turns into a crutch. There's a lot of health benefits of caffeine. It's when it's being used for the wrong reasons, when it's using as a crutch. Yeah. And then Absolutely. It creates a whole bunch of, I think we did a podcast on brain fog once upon a time ago.
I believe so.
Yeah. So that'll tie into a little bit of this and some of the strategies.
There's a ton of other podcasts that we've done that will mm-hmm. tie into this very nicely. Blood sugar, diabetes, adrenals, improving, being productive. That would be a good one.
So I guess briefly to summarize, there's a lot of things that can create this lack of focus. There can be metabolic disorders, things like blood sugar and other things that could be found in blood work. And then of course there's the hyper-stimulated society we live in, where our brains get addicted to the stimulation unless it's on fire, like the example I use with a computer, a TV, and a cell phone. Unless it's on fire, we can't focus on anything. So paying attention to those behaviors and think of your focus and concentration as a muscle. If you don't exercise that muscle, that challenging your focus for those little bouts of periods of time and then build up from there, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse, and it's going to get harder to pull out of.
Yep,
over time.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, leading to getting behind in your workload or your academia or so on and so forth.
Family, work life balance, everything. plays into everything.
Yeah.
So, well, if you guys got value out of this content and you'd like us to continue to push stuff out like this, please let us know. Again, hit like and subscribe, turn on notifications, because we're going to continue to roll out content each and every week. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can do so at info@brainstormingwiththedocs.com. You can find a lot of good information about not only us, but about some of the other stuff that we work with at mine is www.northlakeschiropractic.com, and Dr. Glenn's is www.drgharrison.com. And like I said, if you want to reach out, feel free to. We'd love to hear from you.
For sure. Put your phone down.
Yeah,
15-minute blocks.
You got it.
All right. Well, that was great, Dr. Kolby. I look forward to the next one.
Sounds good, bud. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.